We got a bidet! Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're talking about the brand new Insidious movie that came out this week. Just to give some background, this is the fifth movie that has been released in the Insidious series, but it's kind of like the third film of the main storyline, if that makes sense. So like the first two followed the Lambert family, and then 3 and 4 were like prequels that focused around the lady that did the medium stuff. I forget her
I think her
name.
name's Elise.
Yes, Elise. Thank you. And then this is the fifth movie that goes back to the Lambert family. So, what you would expect to be going back to their roots, kind of a thing, because they've been doing all these spin-off type movies. So, we're here to talk to you about what happened in the movie and then give you our thoughts. And then we will give a rating for each of us will give a rating at the very end of what we thought of the movie. So, there's not a whole lot to deep dive too much into this movie, in my opinion. Basically, we pick up where we left off at the end of the second movie, where Dalton and I forget his name, Josh. Dalton and Josh are being hypnotized and basically trying to forget what happened in or the first and second movie. That way they can just kind of forget about the whole further situation and the astral, was it planing? Is that what it's called?
Astro projecting, I think.
Projecting. So that they can kind of forget about that stuff too and just kind of move on with their life. And so after that scene, that was basically exactly from the second movie, we go 9 years into the future, which is where we take place now. And basically, the family is in kind of shambles. The mom and dad are divorced, and the grandmother, so Josh's mother, has passed away. And so we're at a funeral and we get to see that happening. And kind of the first thing that starts to get things into motion a little bit for this movie is that when the Lambert family is getting ready to leave, Josh sees somebody that he kind of recognizes but doesn't really know if he recognizes them. And it turns out it's the guy that hypnotized them back when they were at the end of the second movie. He just kind of tells Josh, I knew your mother way back when. And obviously, Josh doesn't remember him because he was hypnotized during the time, or hypnotized to forget the time that that guy was in his life. But he just kind of looks familiar. And basically, some of these things that seem familiar that kind of remind both Josh and Dalton about things from the past are starting to unlock parts of their memory, like undoing the hypnotism, if that's the right word, so that they start to evolve and remember the different things. We also see in the beginning of the movie that, along with the divorce, Dalton really doesn't care to see his dad. He ignores him quite a bit in the beginning. It kind of seems like that Josh turned into a little bit of a deadbeat dad, kind of, or just missing from the family's life, and then that's kind of why they don't really like him, because they said a couple of times like you weren't there, kind of a thing, while they were growing up after the whole hypnotism thing. And so there's really two things that happen throughout the rest of the movie after this. And basically, Dalton's going to college, and he's going there for art. And what's happening with him in this whole further business and, getting back his memories is that when he is in art class, his teacher tells him, well, it tells the class, I want you to think of XYZ, and then she's going to count down from 10, and then she wants them to start drawing. And the thing is this countdown is kind of reminding Dalton of when Elise used to count down and send them into the further. Like she would count down from 10, and when she hits 0, that's when they should be, doing their astral type stuff. And so this is starting to, uh, like I said, open up those memories from the past. And we can see that from him because he starts drawing the door eventually, the red door, so specifically. And this picture that he draws progresses as the movie goes on, which is kind of interesting. It's kind of like just seeing how things are evolving for him. Uh, Before I get too much further with him, I also want to say that Josh has told Dalton that he has agreed to seek out mental help so that uh, maybe that's what's been, his barrier for these past handful of years. And so he's trying to do better. And so by doing kind of some of that stuff, he's also getting some triggers from the past when he was supposed to, have his memory erased. Um, there's a lot of like things that fill out the movie in the middle. Um, a couple of them that you saw in the preview. One is it an MRI that he goes in for? So
I think
Josh
so.
goes in for an MRI appointment, and uh, he basically, well, the doctor tells him he falls asleep, and so when he's sleeping, he's imagining this being from the further that is haunting him, and he freaks out about that. He's also dealing with some stuff with his past with his dad. So his dad wasn't there in his life, and he believes that Dalton and the other two kids are lucky to have a dad in their life. But he really hasn't, or he must not have let go of what his dad did with walking out and stuff. And so he's trying to dive into that a little bit deeper too, of who was his dad, and trying to understand what's going on because the doctor is the one that brought up the mental illness. He was like, "Do you have mental illness in your family?" And Josh was a little taken off guard, like he was insulted a little bit. But the more he dove into his dad's history, there was something there because, or at least they believed it was, because he was talking about this whole astral projection thing, that ability that he had. Oh, where do we go from here? Like I said, there's a lot of stuff in the middle that's just kind of like character development type stuff. We get a new character with Dalton's roommate. So he goes to this college that takes being liberal like very literal. And so it's like a co-ed type thing. So his roommate is a female, and uh, she doesn't, I mean, she does serve a purpose, but at the same time, I kind of felt like she was almost like a wasted character, because like she helps Dalton kind of get out of his shell by going to like a frat party and stuff, and that's where Dalton starts to see more of his further stuff, as he starts quote unquote hallucinating about the different people in the house being like dead and stuff. Um, but yeah, so she helps him try to get out of his shell. She's trying to understand him, trying to be his ear, so to speak, when he needs to talk about things with what's going on. Um, but Sarah, you can stop me if you think that there's something that's important that I should say before, because I'm just basically going to jump to the end from here.
I think summing it up with a lot of character development is probably the best way to describe it. There's no real need to be super nitpicky about every single little tiny thing.
Right, because I mean, yes, they kind of do add a little bit here and there to the story, but we'll leave that for you guys to go and see if you want to see all the little nitty gritty things that they do.
We're trying to do like a short summary.
Yeah. And so the ending of this movie, basically, Dalton goes into the first, he's been, messing with some of this astral projection stuff. And, he has this painting of the red door. So he draws a door, like a normal white door first. And then when he's drawing it in class, he like the like red dude behind me, I is my guess, is the one that cuts his hand, because we're seeing that things that are a part of the further can interfere with things that are in the real world without transitioning over. And so he cuts Dalton's hand, and that's Dalton puts his hand on the painting or the drawing, and that's kind of where the red starts. And then he just spreads it out all over the place, like once he gets back to his dorm, and that's what creates the red door picture. And so eventually, Dalton tries to like go into the further and whatnot, and seek out this bad guy. And while he's doing that, he enters the area where we saw in the first movie where this red dude resides, like his big theater area with a bunch of props. And then he's got like an office upstairs. Um, Dalton sees all the things of his past in there. So, like when Dalton was on the ladder and he reached up for the light and he fell off of it, that was in there. I think there was a scene of when he was in his coma. So they had one of those there. But ultimately, what's happening with this scene is that the red dude, don't really know what to call him, red demon, um, he's taking over Dalton's body, and then so he can be a part of the real world, which is what Sarah's picture is right there. Um, and while he's doing that, Josh, the dad, feels like, oh, Dalton's in trouble, kind of a thing. And so he goes into the further and he tries to go and save his son, which he's able to help him. And then when they're running away, that's when we see the red door. They run through the door, they slam it shut. And the dad's kind of like, I'll hold him here. You go on and, live your life or whatever. And uh, my understanding was that Josh was going to quote unquote stay there so he can just hold the door. Um, so Dalton leaves, and the dad is having like this really hard time trying to hold the door closed because they're banging on the door. At one point, they bust a hole through the door, and we see the red dude peering through it. But then Josh sees like this black stuff coming down from the door, and he goes like, paint, paint. And so when Dalton went back to the normal world, he got out his paint kit and drew black all over the red door, which I guess seals off the door because it's not red anymore. They've made a big point about this door being red in the past, so obviously that's important. But by painting it black, it's closed off the further. Um, and so Josh is able to eventually get back to his body as well. He does see his dad on his way out. His dad, he sees his dad in the further. Doesn't really get to talk to him, but he does see him. And then
The big part of that, I think, was that he got closure about his dad. Like he was able to see his dad and be okay about it.
yeah,
Um, because he also found out earlier in the film that his dad had, I believe, committed suicide by jumping off a building, like many, many years ago. So it's not so much that his dad's still abandoning him. He found out that his dad's been dead and has come to understand that his dad abandoned him as a kid because he was dealing with the same stuff that Josh is dealing with now.
right. And so we kind of get this joyous ending where everybody is now okay. They have this feeling that they won, and the mom, forget what her name is,
Renee?
Renee. So like when Josh is leaving the house and Renee is with the kids, she invites him to dinner the next time that he comes over, and it kind of shows that maybe they're gonna have a better, more positive friendship moving forward, or at least just trying to make the family work a little bit better. Um, I don't really think there was any inclination that they might get back together, but they'll be more civil and stuff because she's kind of like very bitter and aggressive towards him in this movie, and towards the end, I think she lightens up a little bit. There is a small, very small after credit scene, and the after credit scene is that so when Josh left the door when it was painted black, the light had gone out over the top of it, and the after credit scene was that light flickered and came back on. So that is going to imply that there's probably going to be more of these films. Um, this film has no indication that it's the final movie in the series, like from the name at least. So I can definitely see that they could be making more in the future. So, with all that being said, Sarah, what did you think of the movie?
I liked it. I don't think it was like the best movie ever, but I would say that it's above average for me. When I think of like a horror movie and what kind of stuff I like to see, and have it be more than just jump scares, there were a couple little jump scares, but there was also a lot of really creepy stuff too. I mean, even just the image behind me for my background is kind of creepy, and to see, him be taken over and possessed and coming at his roommate like that. Was kind of creepy to see. His roommate character, I actually liked. I felt like she served her purpose and she was kind of fun and flamboyant when she was a part of things. Um, there were some little things that I thought were kind of weird or not really sure on their intent. Like towards the end of the film, Josh sees Elise again and she says some lines that he's heard before about, just make sure you keep taking strides or something like that. Um, and so I don't really know what to make of that scene. It seemed kind of weird, and out of place. So I don't know if that was trying to allude to, more stuff's going to happen in a future film, like, he's going to have to go back in the further again or what. Um, it's kind of one of those things that's like almost too ambiguous that it almost doesn't make sense as to why it was there. Uh, but overall, I liked the film.
I was looking up to see if there's. I heard from other channels that there are sequels in the making, and yes, that's plural. Uh, Meaning that there's probably going to be at least another one that is following the Lambert family, is my guess, and then probably some other spin-off type movies.
I could easily see a follow-up movie where one of Dalton's siblings goes into the further by accident or something, like a monster under the little girl's bed that brings her into the further or something like that, and then they have to go and save her and stuff like that. That doesn't seem very far-fetched to me.
Yeah. Um,
What did you think of the movie?
well, we actually had a little bit of time to think about the movie. We saw it a handful of hours ago, and I had kind of so like as I was watching the movie, uh, hold up, let's strike that, reverse it. Let's back up a little bit. So here's the different perspective. I also think that might help with my explanation. I binged the first four movies before we saw this movie this week, and so I got all caught up on what has happened in the past, so that I would know what's happening now. And so by binging those movies, I know where the series has been, and after watching this one, I feel like this is probably one of the weaker films, and I'll explain why. So, watching this movie, well, actually, first of all, this actually was the first, I think it was the directional debut for
Patrick Wilson?
Patrick Wilson. So that was cool. He did do a lot of things that I really like in horror films, but the payoff wasn't quite there. And what I mean by that is one of the elements that I really like in horror films is like when us as the audience can see that there's something scary is in the background or lurking amongst these characters and they just don't know it. And so they're going about their business as usual, but there's definitely something going on. I think that's amazing horror. I think that's what's gonna, uh, you know, bother people the most when they go home after seeing this movie. You know, you every day. People sit down, they watch TV. Is there something behind you? Is there not staring at you? You don't know because all you do is nonchalantly watch TV every day. And so it's that kind of a thing. They're going about their business with their life, and there's this random horror stuff happening going on. And so I like that. One of the a couple examples, a lot of them actually have to do with Josh, and I believe it was his dad that was following him. It kind of looked like him, anyways. So, like in the beginning at the funeral, Josh is tinkering with his phone before he, leaves the cemetery, and we can see this being walking up to his car, but we don't really see what it is. And so it's just constantly getting closer and closer. And then Josh does this thing where he leans over the console, and then his head is covering up the image of that person. And so when he comes back from doing his thing, the person's gone. And us as the audience are like, oh my God, this person just walked up to the van. Where is he? What's going to happen? Where's the jump scare? And stuff like that. And so I think that he did a really good job with those kinds of setups, but I don't think they like super paid off um, as far as being scary. Uh, Most of the scares, in my opinion, in this movie were like jump scare type things where, something scary happens and it sounds like someone bangs on a piano kind of a thing. Um, but I can appreciate the attempt of what was going on. Something else that I thought was kind of interesting about this movie, and this is probably the biggest disconnect with the other films, is I was thinking to myself, okay, so in the first movie, we basically established this world with this family, and we really didn't get many answers. We just got a bunch of horror. And then in the second movie, they expanded on the lore. They explained what were some of these things. Who was that woman that was always in the pictures of Josh and whatnot? And then we go to the third movie and fourth movie, and we expand on Elise's character, and we learn more about that. And then we got to this movie, and I was thinking, like, what did we learn about the further?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah, what did we learn? Anything?
Uh, I didn't really go into this movie expecting to learn anything, I suppose. Other than the significance of the red door, maybe. But we kind of already knew the significance of the red door, so I'm not sure that that was really new information, just kept it going, I guess.
Right. So what I'm saying here
Well,
is,
we learned
like
about Josh's dad.
we did learn about Josh's dad. That was like a family drama, though. Half this movie was part family drama, then the last 20 minutes really dives into some of the further, I would say. But we didn't really expand or learn anything about the further. And I thought that was kind of what pulled me out of it a little bit. Because when I watched the first one and they went into the further, the stuff that they did in the very first movie, I thought was genius. I'll remind you of what happened. And Sarah, you may not remember, so this might be enlightening to you. But Josh goes into the further trying to find Dalton, and he goes into this house and he sees like these people that look like mannequins, but they're not mannequins. They're just in like a setup of a scene, so to speak. And they don't move. He walks up to them and he's like trying to look at them, and they're just standing still. He moves to another room, and then they change and they make a new scene. And then when he hears like this noise and he goes back to the living room he was in, and he sees they've all moved, and one of the daughters like shot the family and stuff. And so there's like a creative way of telling these stories in the further. Whereas here, I feel like all they did was um, Dalton and Josh were being haunted again. We already know they were haunted in the past, so it kind of felt like a them trying to educate us on things that we already knew about. So it was the movie felt like a review of the further and not adding to the further. Does that make sense?
Sure.
I also was kind of thinking, like, I was trying to put it into perspective. I was like, we kicked off the movie with the ending of the second one where they erase their memory. And then the rest of the movie, we are establishing what that memory was. And so it reminded me of like video games where it's a sequel and somehow you're the hero that loses your powers. And so you have to like relearn everything. So in that instance, it's engaging because we are the person that's like redoing all that stuff. I kind of feel like this is as if like there's this awesome new video game you want to play, you buy it, and then you got to watch your sibling play it, but you really want to play it, kind of a thing. It's not new to you, but you don't get to engage with it very much, if that makes sense. So I felt like this movie was we erased everything from before, and then we're re-seeing what was in the past, and it's kind of being addressed as being new when it's not, and then uh, the movie's over by the time they probably get close to doing some new stuff. If I were to say one thing that was new about The Further, I would say that I did not realize that Dalton and Josh could like instantly fall into the further, like a force ability. Like, I'm gonna go into the further now and just knock out. I did not know that was a thing. I thought they had to like when Elise was counting down from 10, I thought someone had to help them either fall asleep instantly or they had to fall asleep like normal because I can't just sit in a corner and fall asleep in like 10 seconds.
When did they do that?
There was a flashback to when so this is when Dalton was a kid. There was a flashback when Josh was trying to kill the family because he was possessed by the woman. And Dalton was like, I can go help dad. I can go help dad. And the mom's like, okay, but be careful. And he went into a corner and went,
He did have one of those tin can phones, but yeah, I don't know. That might have been a misstep.
when he was an adult. So this is where it makes sense that he was able to do it so quick. So there's a scene we talked about how he goes to the frat party and he sees like some dead people type stuff, and uh, they go back to that house because he's like, well, that's the one place that I was able to get in contact with some of these things to figure out what's going on. Maybe we should go back and then I'll do it again. Well, his roommate goes with him and she counts down from 10. So that made sense.
Yeah.
But when he was a kid, it didn't make sense to me that he just fell asleep. And if he could do it as a kid, why couldn't he do it as an adult?
There was another time in his dorm where the power went out, but his fan kept going. Like he needed a generator to get the light on, but the fan kept rotating and turning on. Like the fan never turned off.
I didn't even notice that. But you know what I did notice? So Dalton is afraid of the dark, and rightfully so. He's seen some stuff. But like Sarah said, he was trying to get the generator thing. There was so much light that his blinds were keeping out of his room. If he would have just opened the blind, I'm pretty sure there was like a spotlight or a street lamp out there that would have just lit up his room like no tomorrow.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I was like,
So
why don't you just open the blinds?
yeah, I mean, you're so concerned. You got this little Bath and Body Works nightlight that you got there trying to keep you from dying from the further. And you're trying to rely on that stuff when you can just open your window. But so that's kind of why I thought that the movie was a bit weaker. Just that it felt like it tried to restart what was happening like with a blank slate, but then when they filled in the story details, it was essentially the same stuff happening from the past because they're bringing back their memory. Um,
It's just a different version of storytelling too. When because the first time when we're learning this stuff, we don't know anything about it, neither do they. But this time we know all this stuff and they don't. So it's kind of like, how is this going to play out? How are they going to react to this? How is it going to combat this issue? You know, not saying that it gets like a free pass for just doing everything the exact same or anything like that. Um, but I mean, it's got some dramatic irony to it.
I would agree that it's an interesting style, but again, I wish I would have learned something. In I was talking about the second movie where, the family is still going through some crazy stuff, but we do learn about the old woman. I feel like this movie, if they would have cut some of the, um, in my opinion, not so important stuff in the middle and maybe expanded it on this guy, or if there's some other dude in the further that's creepy that was trying to get after Dalton, whatever. I think it would have been cool to expand on something from the further, as opposed to, like you said, maybe the door would be the excuse of something new. I really don't think that would count, but maybe that's what they would say counts. Um,
I
but
had
yeah,
to try to get something. I mean, come on.
their time in the further didn't seem as engaging as the movies in the past. And so that's kind of where my disconnect was. But I'm hoping that maybe in the future, they'll kind of go back to those roots of telling a scary story for our heroes, but also explaining a little bit more with the further. Maybe the reason why it seemed kind of missing is because Elise wasn't really in this movie too much, and she's really the one that educates people on the further. Her and her ghost hunter boy friends. They have a YouTube channel, and we see them on there for a little bit, but that's about all we get from them.
Yeah, it's just old footage.
Yeah. So, is there anything else you want to say before we give some ratings?
Let's hop in.
All right. What would you give this movie out of 10?
I am going to give it a 7. I think I liked it more than you did. My expectations, I don't think were nearly as high as yours, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't think it was like, top notch, best I've ever seen, which is kind of where I'd try to, you know, have like a 9 or a 10 is, if it's like really high up there. But I think it's above average, so it gets above a 5. So I'm giving it a 7.
Gotcha. I think I would give this movie a 5 out of 10. I think it's an average film. I don't think it is a horror movie that stands above really hardly any others. Um, I was trying to, so when we were at the theater, I was trying to gauge like, are any of the typical horror movie things that, I hate that people do going to happen with this movie? One, is someone going to scream really loud? Two, are people going to laugh? Or three, is there going to be like oh, don't go in there kind of a thing that's going to happen? And none of that stuff happened in this movie. I feel like when we go to see horror movies, we get some sort of reaction from the audience when that stuff happens, but
It
I
just
didn't
means
hear.
good movie theater etiquette.
Yeah, they had good etiquette today. Check out our movie theater etiquette video on the channel. So yeah, I would give it a 5 out of 10. I wish there was some more that was engaging with learning new stuff about this universe. Because I think it's really cool. I think they do a great job of presenting their bad guys and explaining who they are and what was their backstory. I mean, I could tell you right now what the backstory is of the old woman, clear as day. But I can't tell you anything new from this movie that explain anything about people from the further, or I don't know if it's really a thing, the relationship of the Lamberts with the further, but just the fact that it wasn't just Josh that started it, it was his dad first. And that's about it. So I would say if you're an Insidious fan, I would wait until streaming to see this, in my opinion. Um, Sarah, do you feel any different?
I mean, I rated it a 7, so I think it's worth seeing, but that's just me.
Seeing in theaters?
I would.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, that was our discussion on Insidious The Red Door. Again, I look forward to another one. I don't think this is one where I'm like, okay, I'm done with this series kind of a thing. I just think it was I think they tried to be different and it wasn't quite, it didn't have the same heart as the other ones, in my opinion. So I look forward to some sequels. If you enjoy this type of video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way you are notified when more movie discussions drop. We do have some very popular movies coming out this month that we are looking forward to. I can tell you we're looking forward to Oppenheimer, Barbie, and I think there's one other one that comes out this month. Oh, The Haunted Mansion comes out at the end of the month.
And Blue Beetle comes out shortly after that.
Yeah, I think Blue Beetle is like the first week of August. So we're going to be having discussions on those when they come out. So stay tuned for that. Drop us a like if you like this video and drop us a comment letting us know your thoughts on Insidious The Red Door. And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.